My name is Ala, and I'm delighted to be here with you today. So I'm an investment associate at the Ascension Life Fund, where we focus on late-stage seed investments on healthcare. So we focus really at the intersection of life science, healthcare, and traditional technology. Today, we brought forward this timely panel to discuss how the pandemic has affected investments in healthcare. This is the first time in living memory where we've had to rethink the way we engage with ourselves, but also our own health. The pandemic has really put global healthcare systems under unprecedented pressure, but this also drove public and private sectors to realize the importance of healthcare investments. This has really manifested itself in how many healthcare companies we've actually seen dominate the IPO market over the last year or so. So really for our industry, this has been sort of an awakening. We've had to navigate through how we're going to meet this demand and how we're going to evolve. And today we've reached this inflection point where COVID has changed the way that we approach health and technology, but it's also called for a shift towards decentralization and increased reliance on AI and machine learning. I'll stop talking about this because my panel is much more qualified to do so. We have some incredible investors, operators, and active angel investors here today to kind of go through this topic and explore a bit more how our industry has been affected by the pandemic. So I'm going to start off by passing over to Paul Salentes from 24 Haymarket to introduce himself and the rest of the Haymarket team, and then we'll move through the rest of the panel. Over to you, Paul.
Thanks, Ala, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Paul. I'm the CEO of 24 Haymarket. We are an angel-led investment firm, been operating for 8 or 9 years. We have one of our core focus areas is the digital healthcare area, where we have invested across the spectrum from diagnostics all the way through to therapeutics and service providers on the other side. Stuart and Paul work very closely with my team and I in evaluating and then supporting our investments in this space. I'll maybe hand over to Stuart to say a few words about his background, and then Paul Hewitt.
Thanks, Paul. Stuart Fletcher, member of 24 Haymarket Network. I, up until 2016, for 4 and a bit years, was the global CEO at Bupa, which is where I started my journey into health. Prior to that, I was 26 years with Diageo, running the international business, everything outside of Europe and North America. But my health interest started at Bupa and continues through 24 Haymarket, but also directly through a couple of other investments that I'm involved with. Humour Therapeutics, where I'm on the board and an investor, and ISOS Health. Paul.
Thanks, Stuart. My name is Paul Hewitt. I've been involved as a founder, mentor, and investor in early stage companies for about 15 years and a member of the 24 Haymarket Network for the last 4 years. Digital health is not the only, but the largest part of what I do. I'm the investor director for 24 Haymarket on 2 digital health companies, Doctor and Fibris, and outside 24 Haymarket on Thalamos, who are involved in technology for mental health. I've got about another 10 investments in the space. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. I'm going to pass over now to Alenazi from CMS Ventures to introduce herself.
Thank you, Ada. My name is Alenazi Jabado. I'm the managing director of CMS Ventures. CMS Ventures is an investment vehicle in the UK to fund promising early stage companies. We're not a fund per se, we invest off balance sheet. The main focus is the 4 Ds and what I like to call the 5th D, which you won't find on our website. So the 4 Ds you'll find on our websites are drugs, devices, diagnostics, and digital. And the 5th D is demented. We like things that are completely crazy, that you can't put in a vertical, things that people haven't seen before. And traditional VCs have to invest in very strict verticals, and we like to see what's new. And with COVID, we've all seen that demented is a real thing. So if you have something demented, please reach out. My background is not scientific. I'm an arts and humanities Chinese rat that became entrepreneur, angel investor. And I worked with the University of Cambridge for about 10 years, where I supported over 180 early stage companies. I am now completely on the institutional investment side, and we look at investing into pre-seed, seed, and Series A biotech companies. I sit on the board of two of our investment companies. One is Curate, which is AI for lungs, and the other one, Exceed, which helps the which helps sperm count. So that's it for me, Ella.
Wonderful, Nadia, thank you. We're also really lucky today to get a European perspective. Caroline Stein, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Ella. Thrilled to be with you. I think I'm the only one who's not in the UK today. We are based in Paris, so my name is Caroline Stein. I'm head of operations of one of the leading angel networks in healthcare in Europe called AngelSante, Angel for Health. So we exclusively invest in biotech, medtech, or digital health, whether it be human or animal healthcare. And we are partners of EIT Health. And as such, I lead on behalf of EIT Health, the EIT Health Investor Network, which is a pan-European network of healthcare investors, from angels up to corporate VCs, that invest in seed and Series A healthcare companies from all across Europe. So we scout and we evaluate companies for our investors and introduce them to our investors, hopefully to make sure that cross-border rounds can be done.
Wonderful, Caroline. It's great to have you here. Finally, we have Chris Wheatcroft, who's the Investment Director for the Ascension Life Fund. Welcome, Chris. Tell them all about the Ascension Life Fund.
Hi, Alec. Great to be here. So I'm Chris Wheatcroft, Investment Director at the Ascension Life Fund. As Alan mentioned at the beginning, we sit at the intersection of technology and health. We've just launched earlier this year, so in January. So we're an early fund. We kind of focus on post-seed, pre-Series A, my background is I've been working in the early stage space for about 10 years. Prior to Ascension, I was at AngelSante, one of the large business angel networks, where I ran their tech and fintech practices. I'm not a specialist healthcare person, but it's been a fantastic learning experience so far, and very excited to be here.
Wonderful. Thanks, Chris. I think we'll just dive straight into the big question. How has the pandemic affected investments in healthcare? And I'm going to zoom over to Paul, if you don't mind. Paul Salentis, I should clarify.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you. I mean, it's, I think across the board, the last 12 months have led to a real bifurcation of outcomes, and never before have the extremes between the winners and the losers been as wide as they are right now. And obviously our job as investors is to try to expose ourselves as much to the winning themes, and then to isolate our exposure to areas in our portfolio that are struggling, whether that's in healthcare or in other areas. I think we as a business have become a lot more focused in terms of the areas that we're looking at, and obviously digital health and healthcare more generally is one of the core areas that we're going after. But within even that sort of forum, you're seeing certain themes or areas that are massively outperforming, whether that's a greater adoption of digitalization of services as part of one part of dealing with the elective surgery backlog, whether you're seeing greater adoption of remote diagnostics and disease management technologies. All of those things COVID has really been a massive catalyst for. On the other side, I don't think you can say that it's kind of impacted the healthcare industry universally in a positive way. I think we're seeing certain areas in our portfolio, particularly some of the drug companies that are kind of bringing their candidates to later stage clinical trials, where they've just seen a slowdown in terms of kind of patient availability or subject availability for those trials, as people have really been kind of focused on the COVID vaccine trials. equally, anybody who is beholden to large partners as part of the distribution path to market, and in particular the equipment manufacturers and medical device companies, those guys have been distracted and their attention elsewhere. So you've seen a real slowdown in their decision making. So I think the healthcare segment, like many of the other verticals that we follow, you see some real winning themes, and then some areas that are really slowed down and are struggling. Now, I think the good thing is that in the healthcare industry, those areas where you've seen the slowdown should see a good bounce back as we will exit lockdown and normal life resumes. And that is a positive aspect about the industry in general. But that's our view. So we're trying to be a lot more focused in terms of what we think are the winning 3 or 4 themes and go after those ones pretty hard.
Fantastic. Solid point on clinical trials being stalled. I think we've seen that with a lot of the medical device companies as well. I'll pass over to Hanadi to perhaps comment. You're embedded deep in the Cambridge ecosystem, so you have a very unique perspective.
I'm not sure that Cambridge is unique. I mean, I think, well, I'm sure lots of people will disagree with me, but I think what we saw has been a global movement. I mean, it's not just what's happened. I think one of the big repercussions from the pandemic is that we couldn't, the world had to actually find a solution together. And it's been collegiate, it's been collaborative, it's been multidisciplinary. So I think that's probably the biggest repercussion, that people have actually worked together and been able to deliver more quickly. I think I'm going to steal a couple of ideas from Dan. We talked a lot preparing for this, and Dan is feels very strongly that digital health has had a boost that it wouldn't have before. And I fully agree with him in the sense that whilst digital health has been trending and has been a fad, it's become a necessity. So all of us here are sitting having a conference on health digitally, that we would have had to travel before. We would all have gotten on a train and gone to Liverpool and to see people. But people have been reluctant to actually go and see a doctor. And what we've seen is that digital health is no longer a fad, but a real necessity, and for 2 reasons. One, to access health, and the second one, to be used as a triage for those that really need to see a doctor. So, and I don't think that we'll be coming back from that triage digitally after things calm down.
Agreed, Hanadi, thank you. Caroline, do you see similar things in Europe as we have in the UK?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, European figures show that telemedicine has increased in terms not only in volume, but of number of deals done in Europe in 2020. And also, thankfully, and some of the bigger deals that have happened above 100 million have been in biotech. So biotech has been also finding itself a little bit in the increase. However, medtech has gone down a little bit. But what is surprising is, indeed, we knew that at the beginning of the pandemic that investors would really look at their portfolio companies, keep their money to support their portfolio companies. Startups would probably slow down their fundraising because they wouldn't be able to reach some milestones. But what is interesting is, from my experience, there's also the part about funds being able to raise money, not just startups. And in Europe, what we've seen is that larger funds are being raised. I mean, in the UK, you have Atomico for like more than 800 million, which is huge. The EIC, which is the largest public fund with 3 billion euros that has been launched recently. But it seems that the pandemic has also slowed down the raising of smaller funds below 100 million, which makes me a little bit nervous about the early stage, seed stage investments in the coming year. But you know, globally, the trend has been very positive in terms of healthcare investment. So, I mean, it's true, it's bigger deals than the past 2 years, but hopefully, I think it's going to keep on being very strong.
Fantastic. Thank you, Caroline. I mean, Ascension Life Fund is one of those new funds that have launched in response to that major unmet need. I'll pass over to Chris to perhaps comment a little bit more on that and how, you know, we're responding to the need.
Sure. Thanks, Anna. I just actually wanted to pick up on a couple of points. I mean, one of the things that Paul said regarding clinical trials, we've seen a number of companies responding to that and trying to have better data for clinical trials so that the kind of patient identification is more successful. I think that's one theme that we've seen. Obviously, telemedicine, I think there's been a kind of generational shift in terms of the acceleration of adoption there. And I guess the other point that I was going to say was from a kind of investor perspective, from an early stage angel investor perspective, at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a bit of a slowdown where people were kind of like, right, I'm just going to keep my powder dry and concentrate on my existing portfolio. But I think now that people have a bit more confidence, certainly we're seeing a lot more interest in especially in the healthcare space. And then finally, my last point of slightly kind of scattergun comments is that actually in the vaccine space, which was not a particularly kind of sexy space for quite a long time, that's obviously shifted dramatically, and the innovations we're seeing there are extremely interesting and relevant, obviously.
Brilliant point. There has been some shifts in, you know, the trends that we see, which really lends itself onto the next question, which is what are the most interesting trends you've seen, and what is here to stay, and what is perhaps a temporary response to the crisis? And for that one, I think I might pass over to Alenazi to go first.
Thank you, Ala. So I think that vaccine, definitely, we've seen more vaccine companies and more funding going into vaccine. One of the most interesting trends of stuff that was struggling to find funding before is finding a cure, for example, to the Zika disease or to dengue. Diseases that were considered niche and not relevant to us. I think something that the pandemic has shown is that we can no longer say this is actually not relevant to our part of the world. So, and for me, that's quite reassuring. And I think that it will have an impact in the long term on a more egalitarian access to healthcare across the world. And I find it positive. We've seen a lot of diagnostic companies pop up left, right, and center to address COVID. And I don't think that they're here to stay if they can't, you know, be a platform and address other diseases than COVID. And that's where I think it's going.
That's really interesting. Thank you. I might actually ask the same question to Stuart. What do you think?
Hi, thanks. I think, look, as a general thing, I think the healthcare systems around the world have been for some time uneconomical in the sense that they're not economically sustainable. I think what's shown up this last 12 months is that's the case, whether it's here in the UK with the NHS as it's currently constructed, or indeed elsewhere in the world. I think that is a driver, albeit likely to be slow, driver of system change. I think it will become a driver of system change because of what's shown up in the past 12 months. I think the inequalities in healthcare that Alenazi talked about are actually very significant, and I think will be seen as, you know, not sustainable in the current form. So they'll be looking for whether it's disease-specific conditions for third world or underdeveloped markets, countries, whatever. I think there will be an attempt to bring about more equal health system access and efficacy through using innovation. I think, though, if we bring it back to the real stuff that's showing up now, I think diagnostics and remote care, whether that's through remote monitoring of condition to be able to triage or provision of remote care using digital means, I think is here to stay. I think that's a very significant factor, and I think we've seen an acceleration of that. I think gene therapy is a way of reducing the waste in the system to become far more targeted. I think that's here to stay. And I think the quotes, unquote, elective care backlog that we're seeing, not just here in the UK, but all around the world, I think that is going to take a long time to recover, and therefore solutions that can help more effectively deal with that backlog, again, by perhaps triaging the most urgent cases to be dealt with through remote monitoring and remote patient management. I think that is here. There was a comment earlier about preventing future pandemics or having more preparedness, and I think whether that's vaccine development or health system capacity, I think that's here to stay, because I think the world can't take economically or any other way another COVID-19. So I think there'll be a lot of investment and focus on things that can reduce the risk there. And of course, there have been some massive shifts in data availability brought about by COVID-19, not least here in the UK, where the emergency powers that have allowed data to flow around, and deal with some of the blockages of control of patient information, that's accelerated the kind of data access point for discovery and development. I think, there's been very little backlash against that. And I think that's likely to remain a factor that, although the general sentiment is data security, data privacy is a big concern, I think when people can see it's being used for greater good, people will be more willing to give permissions, and in fact governments will be more willing to very specifically set aside some of the constraints on that. And then I think finally, the private-public healthcare dynamic, which is very different all across the world, I think that has been improved by COVID-19. We've seen that on any number of fronts, whether it's vaccine development, whether it's testing, and whether actually it will ultimately be part of dealing with the backlog. I think the role of private and public partnering, as opposed to partnership PPP in the traditional sense, is here. So I think there is a great opportunity that innovative, well-targeted, privately owned solutions to work and support publicly owned systems like here in the UK.
That's a fantastic response. Thank you for that, Stuart. We are being rushed, but before we go, I really do want to hear from Paul Hewitt. And more specifically, Paul, what advice do you have for healthcare companies out there looking to raise and take advantage of the current opportunities that are out there?
Right, am I now off mute? That's good. I suppose the first one, and trying to be brief, is a really tight focus, but a focus on a large enough addressable market. And that might sound, of course, a bit contradictory, but quite a few of the opportunities I see string things together which make sense in terms of a product, but don't make sense in terms of commercialization and how you go to market. And I think being really clear about that, being really clear about what your focus is, and then how that ties in to going to market. Because health systems in most countries, and the UK is no exception, are quite complex, difficult to penetrate, and it's no good having something which solves something. Actually getting that to market is really critical, and how you plan to do that, and that's not just the route, but the connections, your network of KOIs, who the people are who you've spoken to give some indication of how that commercialization is going to take place, to build some comfort that you're going to be able to do that. I also see quite a lot of companies that sort of start in the UK and plan to go into the US. And of course, the US is a hugely attractive market because it's so much bigger. But there, that applies in spades too. Understanding the route you're going to take to commercialize is really key. And I think in the interests of time, Ala, I'll cut it short there.
It's such a shame. I wish we had more of it. Thank you for that answer, though, Paul. It was really great to hear. And before they kick me off, I want to quickly say thank you to Giacomo for facilitating all of this and for the Giant Health